Today I'm going to share a very foolish bug in this piece of code that I wrote, and hopefully you will be able to catch my mistake before I reveal the solution. In my Chrome extension, I display the current standings for the National Hockey League in two places, the Standings tab and the Scores tab. However, I noticed recently that the data was sometimes different on the two tabs, even though both of them are pulling the standings data from the same table in the same database. Not only that, but the two endpoints within the Node.js server are calling the exact same function to pull the data. So what's the issue here? If we go back to the problematic code, you'll see that there are very few differences between the two endpoints. In the second endpoint, we are checking if the standings data object is null to avoid redundant calls, and we are also using this format scoreboard standings function to repackage the data. Each tab uses a different endpoint so that I can tailor the response object to how the data will be displayed within each. I try to keep as much code as possible within the backend server, since all front-end code changes need to be reviewed by Google before release to the Chrome Web Store. Have you been able to find the mistake? The bug is caused by the null check for the standings data object. Let me explain. The standings data in the database is updated every night at 1 AM Pacific Standard Time. In order to always have updated standings, I pull this data from the database and use this function to update the standings, factoring in games that have already finished on the current date. The problem with how I wrote this scoreboard standings endpoint is that the updating function is never called unless the standings data object is null, which only happens one time when the server is first booted up. That is why the scoreboard standings have been stale. To fix the issue, I decided to remove the scoreboard standings endpoint entirely. Instead, I will use the normal standings endpoint for both use cases and simply reformat the data on the client side, which in this case would be within the Chrome extension code instead of the Node.js server. Not only will the standings now be accurate throughout the application, but my Node.js server will also have less requests to process. This bug was nothing compared to the 4 major bugs I tackled within this project 2 months ago. Check out this video to see how I handled those.